Good morning.
Good morning.
You know, yesterday we found out that miracles still happen. Texas Tech didn't blow it in the fourth quarter. So, the reasons to rejoice this morning, I guess. That's trivial, but just West Texans, that makes a difference sometimes. We'll be in Acts 15 here in a few minutes. Start out with a little bit of the funnies this morning. I don't know why we argue about money. I guess that's what couples do. Oh, never mind. I can't even remember what we were arguing about. Your short attention span. Anybody identify with that, man? Y'all are too young. No, we do not have a bunch of these at home. This is an orange leaf brand ergonomic bottle with a hand-formed giraffe-inspired nipple spout. My mistake, he says. I can identify with that one. It's not, we kept our younger granddaughter for a while, and the milk at our house wasn't like the milk at her house. Even though it's the same brand, bought from the same store and everything, it's you know what I mean. Well, if it doesn't matter who's right and who's wrong, why don't I be right and you be wrong? That's the best one up here. But what causes divisions? What causes relationships to sour? What are some things that you can think of? We're all different. Okay.
Based on our experiences usually.
Okay. Yeah. What's important is based upon what experiences that we go through. Absolutely.
It's all about me.
It's all about me. So on both sides. So the ego gets in the way. Okay? What causes relationships to sour? What do you argue over as husband and wife? Well, you may not want to admit that. I'm not going to look too wild for me to talk about. Nobody. You let her have the way. You don't argue about anything. That's good.
Money and kids.
Money and kids. Okay. Money and kids. Yeah. All right.
Your side of the bed and mine.
Your side of the bed and mine. Okay. I'm not going to ask anything further. Anybody argue about where we're going to go eat today?
We do that every
Just something as simple as mundane as that. What causes other divisions?
Well, I think lots of times we have the same objective, even in the church, but we have a different way of approaching it.
Okay, good. We have the same objective, but we have a different way of approaching it. Different, no, it won't work that way. It'll work this way, and we still want to go to the same place.
Yeah.
Are differences.
We have in my family, we don't, I've heard that there's some conflicts with mother-in-laws.
In-law conflicts.
Yeah, and there's times it's because of you mentioned self, and another just like for me, I can't go to another church. I have problems. I'll ask questions. Asking questions, will create a problem or a disagreement, or something will talk. There's not always a mutual agreement of talking about things. There's always a conflict of interest.
Okay,
a conflict of, like you said, it's just, it could be somebody's strive, you know, when you try to get out of that, but you don't. But it's always something that, if somebody has to say that we don't like, and we just keep separate. But I have a trouble, like, I can't go very well to with other people, because then they start talking about religious things. And then it gets to me, you know, and I just don't think they accept my way, you know, and so I kind of just separate myself.
okay. So those different things that we grew up with, different belief systems that we had, our pride that often gets in the way, that idea that who's getting the credit over things, is that's caused some work relationship problems with me in the past. Envy, disagreement on what we should focus on. Is that part of it? So today we're gonna focus, using the word focus, on some key elements in restoring relationships, and we are going to be in Acts 15 in a minute, but we want to look at what Jesus says about relationships as to start with. In Matthew chapter 5, verses 21 through 24. You've heard it that it was said to those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to the judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council. And whoever says, you fool, will be liable to the hell of fire. So if you're offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. What's Jesus telling us there? What really hits at you?
I've got a problem with somebody I need to fix.
Okay, you got problems, you need to fix it? Okay. You notice he says, if you got the gift ready to offer, go to the altar. If you're ready to worship God, but you've got something against your brother, what should you do? You're going to leave the gift there. You're going to go away from worshiping God, and you're going to correct something with your brother. Is Jesus telling us? I think he is. Is he telling us that our relationship with our brother is more important than coming forth and worshiping God?
No, that just saying you've got to be prepared before you come and worship me. Get all of these other problems out of your mind and off of your back.
If you're going to come and worship me, you've got to come with the right attitude.
Right.
And having that right attitude is having a right attitude with your brother.
Yes.
Okay. Similar passage in 1 John 4. If someone says, I love God, and hates his brother, he's a liar. For he who does not love his brother whom he has seen, how can he love God whom he has not seen? And this commandment we have from him, that he who loves God must love his brother also. The equating in importance of that love with God, that love with the brother, basically says you can't have a relationship with God if you don't have a relationship with your brother. That's pretty strong stuff, isn't it? That's pretty strong. That should make us hit ourselves in the head and think a little bit sometimes, shouldn't it? If we come in here on a Sunday morning and we've had on Saturday we've had a fight with a brother, with a sister, with a spouse, with a child, and we're coming to worship God, and yet we're not bringing our whole lives into worshiping God. That's important.
Peterson, do we have to stay home to make that attitude right, or to pray just about it?
We've got to get the attitude right. We've got to do that. And just what Jesus says is, if you've got a problem, you better go solve that problem.
I know that in the book of Matthew, chapter 5 and 6, it says, if you don't want to pray, you pray like Jesus. And it talks about our Father. And we do have to forgive others because others will not feel like they're forgiven. And I have to work on that because I don't have no Christians to work something, my attitudes like that. But I treat everybody fine. But when it gets to my people, I know that they don't come to church. And I know that I feel like, they don't obey God. And I get mad and I stay mad, but I don't because I want to have the peace of God in my heart. So I run to make that right. And I try to do kind things to them. And I just tell myself, I hate to be kind sometimes. But I'd rather do kindness than to regret. And to do kindness, the Lord said, be good to your enemies. So I try to do that. And I keep the peace of God. And I can bow down and ask God for forgiveness. And I know I'm forgiven. And I know I can do what is right. So I just think we do have to love people if they don't.
We do have to love people. We're gonna go into Acts chapter 15, and we're looking here at the second missionary journey of Paul, and these are the two missionary journeys overlapped here. The first one is the blue, and then returning in the yellow, and the second one starts out in this. I guess that's a purple color, and it comes back in the orange, and so this second journey lasts 3 years. The team is Paul, Silas, Timothy, Priscilla and Aquila, and Luke, so parts and all of that. And covers 12 different locations, begins in some of those same places. It goes back to some of the same places that it covered in the first journey, Antioch in Syria, on through Cilicia, to Derbe, Lystra, Iconium. Antioch, Pisidia is mentioned on this map, although it's not specifically mentioned in Acts. There's a presumption that he went in there. He tried to go into Bithynia, and Bithynia is right up there on the top there, but that he says that the Spirit prevented him, and so he went on to Troas. Do you remember what happened at Troas? He went to sleep. Does that help? He had a dream. What did he dream of at Troas?
Macedonia.
Yeah, he had a man calling, come on over into Macedonia. And so went on there to Samothrace, which is in this little island in between there, and then on to Macedonia, to Philippi, and to Neapolis, to Amphipolis, to Apollonia, Thessalonica, Berea, and then on down to Greece. Got him visiting Athens, Corinth, Synchrea, back over to Ephesus, Asia Minor here, and then finishing up in Caesarea and Jerusalem, and finally back to Antioch in Syria. Covers 2,800 miles, which is about twice what we covered last week. Last week we went from Lubbock to Sacramento. This week we're going from New Jersey to Sacramento, so about 2,800 miles here. But this momentous journey, this 3-year journey, 2,800 miles, it gets off to a rocky start. Acts 15, verse 36. After some days, Paul said to Barnabas, let us return and visit the brothers in every city where we proclaimed the word of the Lord and see how they are. Now, Barnabas wanted to take with him John called Mark. But Paul thought best not to take with them one who had withdrawn from them in Pamphylia and had not gone with them to the work. And there arose a sharp disagreement, so that they separated from each other. Barnabas took Mark with him and sailed away to Cyprus. But Paul chose Silas and departed, having been commended by the brothers to the grace of the Lord. And he went through Syria and Cilicia, strengthening the churches. This disagreement here. Who's right and who's wrong?
We don't know. Probably something of not great consequence.
Anybody have an opinion one way? How many think that Paul was in the wrong? Raise your hand. I know it's hard to say, well, Paul in the wrong.
You always have to have a group of people to agree with, to know what is right.
How many would you think that Barnabas was the one who was in the wrong? How many think Paul was in the right? How many of you think Barnabas was in the right? How many of you don't care one way or the other? Well, there's a hand. Yeah, it's like Peter says, we weren't there. We don't know. It's hard to say. There are some elements that don't look quite right though here, aren't there? Elements of saying, you know, Paul, could you not have some sympathies for John Mark? John Mark had left them in Pamphylia on the first journey. We don't know why John Mark left them. Maybe John Mark was homesick. Maybe John Mark had decided, just got a little scared. This was an intimidation. Maybe he's even intimidated by Paul. And decided around. Maybe John Mark got word from home that there was something going on. Maybe something happened in Pamphylia that scared John Mark. He says, I can't go on through. We don't know. And we've got Barnabas saying, give John Mark a break here. The other side, got Paul saying, hey, we can't have this happening again. We're out here to evangelize, to take the word back to these people, take the word, even farther if we can. We can't have this messing us up. We can't have this relationship ruining our focus. We've got a job to do. Yeah. Let's look at what we do know. We do know that they both loved God and they loved each other. Is that correct? Safely say that. Look at the long relationship that Paul and Barnabas, Saul and Barnabas, Barnabas and Saul, as it was previously stated, had. And we find through much of that relationship, who was the mentor? It was Barnabas. Yeah. Barnabas was the mentor of Paul. We have Barnabas being listed first through much of that. We find Barnabas going and finding Paul and taking him, and the two of them working hand in hand. So we know they loved the work. We know that they loved each other. Both were passionately living in their gifting. What does that mean? What were the gifts of the two.
Barnabas was an encourager.
Barnabas was an encourager. He sure was. Barnabas was your real people person, right? Barnabas was the person that says, hey, if this doesn't get done today, it's all right, because my relationship with my brother is more important than that. And when we find that he and John Mark going on, it doesn't say they went on this long 3-year journey and went all of these different places. It just says they went to Cyprus. And maybe they did go a lot of places after that, but we don't know. But we do know that relationship, that grooming of John Mark, that was important to Barnabas. What about Paul? What's his story?
Preaching.
Preaching, yeah. Paul's strength is preaching, giving the word. Paul's your go-getter. Paul may have been sort of an A-type personality. That he's focused on that, focused on getting the job done, and Barnabas just the opposite. So, but we know that these are continuing with their gifting, and more important, neither left the mission, much less losing their faith. Both went on. So when we think of this wrong or right, is this disagreement? Is this Satan at work, or is it God at work?
Probably God at work, because we want to have more territory.
Okay. In the long term, it's God at work. In the short term, was Satan there? Satan was definitely, anytime that we've got Christians getting into a disagreement, a sharp disagreement, as the word calls it, there's something about Satan that's into that. I think I mentioned last week that when we come to God, that's when Satan starts attacking. When we're away from God, Satan doesn't worry about us. He's got us in his fist, clenched in his hands. But when we're on God's side, when we're pushing God, Satan's attacking. So here, Satan attacks a stronghold, does he not? This relationship between Barnabas and Paul. But in the end, God, as in all things he can, turns what Satan intended for wrong into good, does he not? We not only have Barnabas and Paul going out together, we have two missions now. We have God working out conflict, and what the enemy sought to destroy, God multiplies. And so instead of just Barnabas and Paul going together, we've got Paul going in this direction, we've got Barnabas going in this direction, we've got both of them mentoring other people to go out later. Both parties pressing on for the greater good of the kingdom. When there's a disagreement, when there's a conflict, a lot of times, what do we look for? Who's to blame, don't we? Or what to blame? I mean, we would blame the dog. The dog ate the homework. Type of thing. We look for who to blame. And once we've arrived at blame, then we put all of our focus on that blame. And we tend to dismiss that God can redeem these broken things. The blame keeps going, and the relationship, broken relationship, becomes more broken. We need to get away from the blame game and remember that God can change relationships. And God can change us all. And so let's look at a couple of scriptures from Paul as he addresses broken relationships. And the first one we're going to look at is Ephesians 4:26 and 27. Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down in your anger, and give no opportunity to the devil. Paul and Barnabas had a sharp disagreement. You think there was some anger arose there? You think there were some strong opinions there? And maybe did Paul maybe learn out of this a little bit better how to handle anger? So what do we know about anger from this verse? What does Paul tell us? Pardon? Yeah, don't let the sun go down, okay? Is anger a sin? That says it's not, so I guess that defines it. Anger is not a sin, is it? Is it okay to be angry?
Jesus got angry.
Jesus got angry. For a good purpose, right? Anger is necessary sometimes, would you say that? Anger is necessary to change whatever situation there is. Anger is necessary sometimes to let the other person know the depth of one's feelings about a particular thing. When does anger become a sin?
When you start using the word you.
When you start using the word you, okay.
When you start saying, I'm going to kill, I'm going to hate.
Okay, when your anger becomes a sin, when that anger goes into further into action. Okay, that's a good way of putting it. Goes into action, goes into hateful words, goes into a personal attack against a person. It's okay to be angry and to push for one's feelings about a person, but when you start attacking a person individually, that's when anger becomes wrong, is it not?
And we know of Paul having the spirit. Barnabas, because he was disagreeing with Paul, we have our opinion there, because with Paul we don't have much of an opinion. We always go by what that he was doing God's work.
Yeah. So anger is not a sin, but the second thing that the scripture tells us is anger should have a time limit. Yeah. Don't let the sun go down on your wrath. No. Be angry, but be angry in such a way that you're going to work that situation out. That you're not going to destroy your brother with your anger, your sister, your spouse with your anger. And the third thing is, anger can become an opportunity for the devil to attack. Give no opportunity to the devil. As long as you let that anger continue and sizzle and begin sinning with that anger, then that's going to give the devil more opportunity. What about this relationship between Paul and John Mark? 2 Timothy 4:11, Luke alone is with me. Get Mark and bring him with you, for he is very useful to me in the ministry. That's a pretty cool statement, isn't it? We know that Paul totally rejected John Mark coming with him. And yet, we know that John Mark went on and he went to Cyprus with Barnabas. Upon his return, he evidently became associated with Peter. We know that from 1 Peter 5:13. We know that later he was with Paul during Paul's first imprisonment, Colossians 4:10, Philemon verse 24. And scholars attribute the Gospel of Mark to this same John Mark. This gospel, which is the first of the Gospels to be written, And it sort of forms the template that Matthew and Luke used to write their Gospels. We knew that John Mark, who ran away at Pamphylia, becomes a tower, does he not? And I can't help but think, wonder what had happened if John Mark went on with them. If Paul had taken John Mark on with him. What would happen if John Mark had never returned to Pamphylia, from Pamphylia, if he hadn't left him on that journey? What if he had gone with Paul and things had gone sour on that second journey with him? Instead of going with Barnabas and being encouraged by Barnabas. Would we have the Gospel of Mark today? God has a way of moving us through our experiences in life, doesn't he? I think things happen for a reason. And so I'm going to say that God uses this disagreement to help mature John Mark into the man that gives us the first gospel. What a power that is. Think about that statement. Conflict is inevitable. I haven't got a very good raising of hands today, but everybody believes that conflict is inevitable. All right, that's a better participation. Thank you. Thank you. Conflict is inevitable. And unless you're a hermit, you're going to rub somebody the wrong way. I'll speak to these people on the line too. You're going to rub somebody the wrong way unless you're a hermit. And you never know when that's going to come sometimes, do you? And sometimes you realize immediately that you rubbed somebody the wrong way because you said, there I go without opening my mouth again. Where's my foot so I can put it in? You know? Sometimes you don't even realize it, do you? And maybe years later, somebody said, remember when you said so-and-so, or when you did so-and-so? I really took offense to that. And you're going, huh? And you may have even meant what you said just the opposite of the way that person took it. Conflict is inevitable. It doesn't matter how easygoing or how laid back you are, conflict is going to be in your future. It'd be nice to think, okay, when we retire, that retires all conflict, right? Now, I will admit conflict decreased when I retired, but it's only because relationships decreased at that time. They didn't end. And so when we have conflict, we don't have a choice of having conflict sometimes. But we do have a choice on how we handle conflict. You know, we can choose to dwell on it, we can choose to fight through it, we can choose to handle it. God, Max Lucado says conflict is inevitable, but combat is optional. It's a pretty good statement, isn't it? Sean recommended this book, The Peacemaker by Ken Sande. I guess that's how it's pronounced. I have not read the book, but he does have in the book the 4 G's of conflict resolution. First of all, glorify God. So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of God. Do all to the glory of God. Have conflict, and you're going to have it. Have conflict to what? Have conflict to the glory of God. Whatever you do all to the glory of God. And here in 1 Corinthians 10, Paul is addressing this food offered to idols and this disagreement about whether you can take a food offered to idols and whether it's good or bad. And it's just before he says that all things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. It's just, do all to the glory of God. So that's the first G. Second G, Matthew 7:5. Get the log out of your own eye. You hypocrite. First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. Of course, this is coming from the Sermon on the Mount, and it's on that section in the Sermon on the Mount that it's talking about judging others. How are we going to handle conflict? We're going to first make sure we're seeing properly. And I love this comparison that Jesus gives here. And you can see me trying to get over here and get that thing out of your eye, and I'm sitting here with a log sticking in my own eye. That's what Jesus paints here. And if we're trying to do that, then we're being a hypocrite. We've got to first make sure that we're seeing properly. Third G, go and be reconciled. And that's the verse we looked at previously. Leave your gift before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Conflict. Anybody ever have a conflict that went away on its own accord?
Yeah. If they moved away.
It didn't go away, it just moved. The conflict was never resolved, is what you're telling me. Yeah.
I've known churches that were solved by a funeral.
Yeah. Yeah. But generally, it doesn't go away its own accord. There's still, even with a funeral, there's still that depth in there. It passes on to the next generation, whatever. Go and be reconciled. But there's a little caveat on that. Don't expect the other person necessarily to accept you're going to them. It's not going to be an automatic thing. I think back, my first job out of college was in Houston. And there was a gentleman there that he and I just didn't get along. I don't know what was wrong with him that he couldn't get along with me. But I found myself over and over, maybe 4 to 5 times in the 2 years that I worked there, going and saying, hey, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get riled up, et cetera, et cetera. He'd just look at me. He'd just look at me, go back to his work. We can't always, the other person's not always going to accept our coming to them. But we have a responsibility to go and do that. And again, before you come to worship God, get your attitude. Go. Fourth G, gently restore. Galatians 6:1. Brothers, if anyone is caught in any transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness. Keep watch on yourself, lest you too be tempted. Again, we want that spirit of gentleness when we go to that same person. Peter, I'm sorry I did what I did to you. Now straighten yourself up and we'll be all right. That's the way we should come at it, right? Gently. Gently. Some of us aren't too good about being being gentle. We're giving over more to bitterness and resentment and holding a grudge and putting the foot back in our mouth. Spirit of gentleness. Paul, the second passage I want to look at from Paul, in Philippians 4. That wasn't supposed to come up there, did I? Yeah, here it is. And those other two in a different order. Philippians 4, verses 2. We're going to start with verse 2. I entreat Euodia and I entreat Syntyche to agree in the Lord. Yes, I ask you also, true companion, help these women who have labored side by side with me in the gospel, together with Clement and the rest of my fellow workers, whose names are in the book of life. It's a similar situation. We have, in this case, two women. We had Paul and we had Barnabas earlier. We have these two women now. And they can agree on some matter that's going on. It may be over another woman, like it was with Paul and Barnabas over John Mark. But they're can't agree. There's a sharp disagreement between these two women. And Paul is asking them to agree in the Lord. Help these women who have labored side by side with me. They've been there side by side with me. Help them. And isn't a lot of times when we come to this passage and we look at this passage and we say, okay, Paul talks about this here, and we need to pay attention to that. And then we go on to the next passage, and that's over with. Okay, but look at the rest of the passage that Paul brings in. Now we think, okay, verse 4, he's talking about a new thing, and he may be. But look what happens if you join these two concepts. If you take where he's talking about these two women and talking about them getting along and working, they've been working side by side. Let's help them agree. Rejoice in the Lord always. In your conflicts you get into, don't just look at verses 2 and 3. Bring in verses 4 through 7. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I would say rejoice. Let your reasonableness be known to everyone. The Lord is at hand. Don't be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your request be made known to God. The peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Look at all those 4 G's that are in there. That if we bring that passage into our conflict, how much easier that conflict is to be resolved. Agree in the Lord. Rejoice in the Lord. Let your reasonableness be reasonable with each other. Wow, reasonableness. That's one thing we can use today. Don't be anxious about anything. Maybe our conflicts are coming because we've got anxiety between each other. But in everything by prayer, supplication, with thanksgiving, bring the Lord into it. The prayer and that supplication. A peace of God. If you're going to have peace with God, you're going to have peace with your brother, with your sister. Guard your hearts and your minds. Some really strong stuff there if you think of that, those later verses to be involved with the early verses. I'm gonna flip back here at this quote of the week. A grudge is to dusk as forgiveness is to dawn. Grudge is to dusk as forgiveness is to dawn. Any comments on that? I don't know why, but when I saw this quote, I thought of a cloud. And when I thought of a cloud, I thought the next thought was iCloud, computer, right? And there's a whole lessons that I've given on the word cloud in the Bible, but for some reason I thought, anybody know what an iCloud is? Marvin, can you help us?
Storage.
It's for storage. Okay, so the iCloud is this big, huge cloud up in the sky, right? And all of our pictures and all of they go up into this cloud, right? And they're just sort of there in the nebulous region, right? Yeah. Well, my friend David had to explain cloud to me the other day. And, it is this huge computer that's way over here in some, Dallas or Fort Worth, or it's, way off somewhere. And it's collecting all of the stuff that it has in there. It's not in a cloud. I hate to pop your bubble if you thought it was up in a cloud. But what is in your cloud? What is in your iCloud? What's it made up of?
Bits and more bits.
Bits and more bits of what?
Information.
Pardon?
Information.
Information. It's what you put there, is that right?
Yes.
The clouds, what kind of cloud you have is based upon what you put there. Right? What kind of relationship you have depends upon what you put into that relationship. Right? If you want your relationship to look like dusk, to be all dark, I love daylight saving time. I never want it to end because I like that extra daylight at the end of the day. Now, some of you are early morning risers. I'm not, so it doesn't make any difference anymore. But I love that daylight at the end. So dusk gets there, and it's just like, okay, but this great day's over with. But the dawn, the beauty of the dawn, forgiveness, dusk, grudge. Another. Okay. Forgiveness is like peeling an onion. I got a whole bunch more good stuff here for you. Let me go on down just real quickly to this part. Forgiveness is like peeling an onion. You peel it away one layer at a time. You weep a little, and then you go back and you do a little bit more. 7 Habits of Effective People, Stephen Covey. I did a whole series sort of based on this book, but I call it 7 Habits of Effective Christians. And you can read a lot of that he has in here. And he mentions the way we handle our conflict here depends a lot upon whether we are high on relationships or we're high on the task being involved. Paul was high. He was a task man. Barnabas was high on relationships. And so if you avoid the conflict, that's not helping relationships, and it's not helping your task, either one. If you accommodate somebody, that does some great for relationships, but it may not get the task done if we just are doing, okay, I'll do whatever you want to. On the other hand, if we're in a competition, we're pulling that task, and we may have a completed task, but it doesn't do a lot for relationship. We may have that 50-50 compromise, and you have that relationship. Okay, let's do half of what you want and half of what I want. We'll get it that way, and that's what we think. Can't we get Congress to do that, please? The best is if we collaborate, if we come together when we have a certain thing, and we start from the beginning and we work through. This is how I feel, and how can we make this best? And that's where we look at. So. Like I said, lots of other things we could say. Prayer idea today. Help me be a peacemaker. Memory verse, do your best to live in peace with everyone. Make it a priority this week to go to that person that came in mind when you heard the word conflict and begin that process of forgiveness. And next week we look at Acts 16 through 18, pattern of evangelism. Thank you for your comments this morning.